Call the October meeting of the Troy Zoning Board of Appeals to order and give a short introduction for our meeting tonight. The Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 70 of your neighbors or peers appointed by City Council to pass judgment on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty running with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chair, come up to the podium and please sign in on the sheet provided. The speaker should identify themselves with their name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, for example, a next-door neighbor, and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request, and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chair to speak at any one time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes for approval are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has a right to appeal the board's decision to the Oakland County Circuit Court. And before we start the official agenda, I introduce the members of the board and city staff that are here. And normally I start on my left, your right, but I'll reverse it tonight and start from the other direction. And on my far right, your left, is the Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Lancaster. Next to her is our Zoning and Compliance Specialist, Paul Evans. For the members of the Board of Zoning Appeals, Zoning Board of Appeals, is Ken Courtney, and then Bill Fisher, and our Vice Chairman, Alan Neal, myself, Dave Lambert, the Chair, and then to my left, your right, is Tom Stratt, who is also the liaison from the Planning Commission, and last but certainly not least, the last board member, Michael Bartnick. And with that, we'll have Mr. Evans read the roll call.
Mr. Bartnick.
Present.
Mr. Clark. Mr. Courtney.
Here.
Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Mr. Neal.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Mr. Stratt.
Here.
And the roll call is completed. We now have on the agenda approval of the minutes from the September 20th meeting. Is there a motion to approve or any corrections to those minutes? Mr. Courtney, I know you had something there.
Move to approve.
Okay. Before there's a second, did you check with Mr. Neal to see if he had in fact made a no vote on any of those resolutions?
I didn't ask him.
Okay. Before the meeting, Mr. Courtney was concerned maybe that you had voted no on 1 or 2 of those resolutions last month. Do you recall that or not?
Yeah, there were a number of items I did vote no on, yes.
Okay.
But
They're being checked by staff. And
Do we want to then postpone action on the minutes, Mr. Bartnick?
Mr. Chairman, I actually had looked at the video earlier and was going to bring those up.
Okay.
Okay.
If I may, at page 2 of this is regarding 3554 Anvil, not the first motion, but the second motion. I was actually the one that made the motion, and it was seconded by Mr. Stratt. And that was at approximately 74 minutes on the video. And then at approximately 76 minutes on the video during the votes, Mr. Neal did vote no, and the other members present had voted yes. Then with regard to the 1927 Sparrow at page 2 also, at 111 minutes, Mr. Neal voted no on the first motion. And then with regard to the second motion, that motion at 117 minutes, I had made the motion to deny the request, and Mr. Stratt had seconded it.
Okay.
So those are the corrections that I...
Okay, I'll move with the as corrected.
So Mr. Courtney moves the minutes be approved with those corrections, and we'll make Mr. Bartnick the seconder since he's the one who sat through the tape. Any discussion on the motion to approve with corrections? Mr. Bartnick, did you have something? Or Mr. Stratt?
No.
Okay. Did you have something?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this is the time to discuss it or later on in the agenda, but I am concerned that the minutes don't yet reflect what we're supposed to have in the minutes in terms of the contents of the motion, the sequence of events at the public hearing. Personally, we did at one point in time, we had someone that was, in addition to running the meeting, was actually keeping the meeting minutes, and those minutes were more detailed. We have different minutes now, and I don't know that everything is in there that should be in there. And my concern is we're relying on a video which may or may not it may or may not exist. I mean, there was one meeting last year where we had audio but no video. The opposite conceptually could happen where we would have a video and no audio, and then we'd have a limited public record of what happened if these minutes do or do not meet it. Also, at the last meeting, there was, I don't recall it, but you could hear a telephone going off, and apparently none of us heard it because we kept talking. Now, in this particular meeting last month, you could still hear what we were saying, but the opposite is also possible. So I would just feel better if the city attorney's office could kind of maybe give us some guidelines on what is required under the Public Meetings Act, and then also what the city attorney's office feels most comfortable with in terms of contents in the minutes, in terms of defending any actions or appeals. The other item is sort of a practical item, goes from a public information or informing the public aspect of it. We really can't look at these minutes and know what was discussed. I mean, what you have to do is you have to sit through and listen to a 2-hour meeting. Now, we don't want to go into the opposite situation where we have a transcript of what happened. I mean, that's not what we want to have. But at least if we had some comments or what were some of the issues that were raised, I just don't feel comfortable yet with these minutes. And again, I don't know if that's the chair's prerogative. I don't know if that's something that should be discussed later on the agenda, or if it's something that we can, I personally would be interested in something from the city's attorney's office commenting on those issues.
Well, unless there's any objection, I think we have some time on the meeting agenda since we only have one issue to deal with tonight. Why don't we take up that particular issue after the one agenda item is up, and we can discuss a little bit more in detail about the concerns on the minutes. So just discussion on the approval of the minutes with those corrections, then we'll deal with the other issue later. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call on the approval of the minutes as corrected.
Mr. Courtney?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Bartnick?
Yes.
Motion is passed, and we will take up the discussion on the future minutes later on in the meeting. Next, any corrections to the agenda for tonight's meeting?
No corrections.
Okay, none from the board. Okay, we will move on in hearing of cases. The first and only one we have tonight is a variance request from Pastor Scott Markin at Zion Christian Church, 3668 Livernois. This is in order to conduct an outdoor special event on Monday, October 31st. It's a variance from the requirement that hours of operation end no later than 8 p.m., and the applicant has requested the event end at 9 p.m. Mr. Evans, could you present the facts of the case for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is located on the east side of Livernois, south of Waddles Road. More specifically, it's the property south of a landmark Walsh College. This is the Zion Christian Church. The property and most of the surrounding property is zoned single-family residential. The property immediately adjacent and north of the subject property is zoned community facilities. That's Walsh College. And as described in the variance request by the chair, the applicant is requesting permission from the city to conduct an outdoor special event on Monday, October 31st, 2011. Now, the city ordinance would allow an outdoor special event of this nature, which would include several things such as outdoor tents, some games, and additional outdoor accoutrements that the applicant could further describe. And the outdoor event, by code, is allowed to continue only until 8 p.m., and the applicant is requesting that the event be allowed to end at 9 p.m. So that is the nature of his request tonight.
Any questions for city staff from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll have the petitioner come up, introduce yourself, and make sure you sign in on the clipboard there, please.
Good evening. My name is Dick Ramsdell, and I'm representing Zion Christian Church. By title, I'm the Business Administration Executive. That translates into taking care of the business side of the church activities. Thank you for listening to me this evening on this. We have held this event at the church for the last 17 years, always between 6 and 9. Of course, as you know well, the ordinance has come into being over the last 12 months, which makes it necessary for us to request this variance. From a practical point of view, if it's not open until 9, it will seriously restrict the things that we're going to be able to offer to the people who come, because there's setup time and takedown time. From a practical point of view also, it's probably going to seriously restrict the numbers of people that will come. We're offering this as an alternative for Halloween evening for people to come to one location with their families, their children. My expectation would be that we would probably see half of the numbers of people if it's 6 to 8 as opposed to 6 to 9, which would restrict the things that are available to the community. People getting home between 6 and 7, it wouldn't be worthwhile for them to come to something that's ending at 8. It probably wouldn't be worthwhile for us to spend as much money as we're spending on it for that also. So what we're requesting is the opportunity to conduct the event during the same hours as we have previously. It's been quite successful. We've had between 1,200 and 1,500 people come. We hope that that would be the same this year. But again, anticipate that if it's restricted to 8 o'clock instead of 9, it would be more in the neighborhood of 800 or so is our guess, or less. And we think that would be a detriment to the community also, because we do get an awful lot of Troy families that come to this event. So we are requesting the 1-hour variance for this event, which is a one-night event. Passed along a support letter. Did each of you get the support letter that talked about the fact that, in a practical sense also, where we're located, there are probably only 2 homes that would even know that anything is occurring out of the ordinary that evening, and those would be the 2 that are sitting facing east on Livernois, directly across from a facility. All of the other residential areas are facing different directions, and of course, as you know, with the berms that we have around the property, probably it's not even going to be noticed that something out of the ordinary is going on. So those are the comments I would like to make. I'm certainly ready to answer any questions that you have also.
All right. Any questions from the board? Mr. Bartnick.
Thank you. And I guess, don't know if it's, well, actually, the question is kind of directed to the city staff members, but also to the petitioner. I take it we're just focusing on the outdoor activity component of this this activity. I mean, although there's a map here of what's going on inside the building, I mean, is that our concern here, what goes on inside the building in terms of events?
Right, that map was in
church.
That map was included as part of his outdoor special event application, but our concern is with what's going on outside.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from members of the board? Mr. Stratt.
So your hardship, as I understand it, is that you would be reducing 1/3 of the time, therefore possibly reducing 1/2, and therefore it would not be feasible for you to continue based on the ordinance, and that is your hardship. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Any more questions from members of the board? Seeing none, if you can have a seat, we'll open up the public hearing in case anyone wants to speak on this. Thank you. We'll open the public hearing. Seeing no one is present, I guess we will close the public hearing. And I would mention, I believe Mr. Ramsdell alerted us to the fact that we did receive one letter in support of the proposed variance. I believe that's the extent of the public communication we've had. Anyone from the board have any further questions, or would somebody like to offer a resolution? Mr. Neal.
I do have one question, and it's more of a history question. Is this request coming up every year for the same event with the time? I'm sorry.
You want to petition?
Well, sure. I'll ask you or staff. What I was wondering, sir, is the request that you make here tonight also done every year because of the same issue?
I'm sorry.
Are you making every year? Are you making a request for the variance for a special event?
Are we making it every year?
Yeah. Have you done that in the past?
No.
No,
This is
okay.
the first year that it's been necessary.
Okay. I was just concerned is that if you're having to come forward every year, I wanted to, after we settle this business, to see if there was something we could do to,
Right.
address that. But I wasn't sure. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Stroud.
Yeah, it is a new zoning ordinance change.
Oh. Okay. Thank you. I understand.
Any further questions from members of the board? Mr. Ramsdale, did you sign in on the clipboard up in the front? Okay, great, thank you, okay. Any further questions? Anyone wish to offer a resolution?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Bartnick.
I don't want to make a resolution, but just I'd like to point out, for the record, the property is fairly large. There's a major street on the west side, a private college, Walsh College, on the north side. South side is also appears to be vacant land, and on the west side, again, with the exception of one or two houses on Colebrook, which are really at the far southeast extreme portion of the property. On the east and northeast, there's a large woods and other field before you get to other residential properties.
Okay.
Kind of go in favor of the evidence is there to support the.
Would you like to make that in the form of a resolution then, since you already stated part of it?
I make too many motions.
Okay, all right. Anyone else like to offer a resolution? Mr. Courtney?
I would, but I'll repeat the same thing as you just said. 'Cause I would support that. In that case, I'll make the resolution.
Okay, Mr. Courtney makes a motion to approve the variance request, citing the information Mr. Bartnick had provided, and also the petitioner, and seconded by Mr. Fisher. Any discussion from members of the board? Seeing none, we're ready for the resolution.
Mr. Courtney?
Yes.
Mr. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Stratt?
Yes.
Mr. Bartnick?
Yes.
Motion passes. You have your variance.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
While we're
Corning.
on this particular subject, I would like to make a recommendation that the Planning Commission consider changing the time limit to 9 o'clock. There may be other reasons for not having it go to 9, but I think 8 was just picked because it's there. And I would like to make it a motion, if the rest of the board feels the same way I do, that we request that the Plan Commission review the 8 o'clock limit on the outdoor activities of this nature, with the intent of changing it to 9.
Before I recognize a possible second, Ms. Lancaster, is there any reason why we couldn't make that kind of a resolution at this point in time?
You can always ask the Planning Commission to consider it.
Okay.
I don't know that I would ask them to set it at 9. Perhaps the next person wants till 10. Maybe what you need them to do is ask them to review the time and ask if it's essential that they have 8 o'clock. Basically, it will still have to go to City Council if there's an amendment. It may take a while. There's a list of little things that have to be tweaked on that zoning ordinance anyway, but certainly you can ask the Planning Commission to take a look at it.
Mr. Courtney, does that sound appropriate
Yes.
for what you wanted to say? Is there a second to Mr. Courtney's motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Stratt.
I just want to let you know that there is a rationale, there's a reasons for it, but I'd rather not discuss it at this point in time. But there are some other reasons why that particular time was picked.
Okay.
Then perhaps I should leave the resolution in abeyance until some later date.
Maybe the appropriate thing would be if we have a rash of these coming in front of us at that point in time, and if they're as harmless as what this one is,
Yeah.
then maybe that's at the point we would approach the planning commission and say, you might want to reconsider the 8 p.m. So no one has seconded Mr. Courtney's motion, so we'll let it kind of die by the side of the road unless somebody else wants to bring it up. All right, you have your variance. Thanks for coming out tonight. Next on the agenda here is communications. I believe we've received a copy of the Michigan Planning Association newsletter from Mr. Evans. Any other communications, Mr. Evans, that you wanted to bring to our attention?
No.
Okay. I would just mention that last night Mr. Neal and I were formally approved for another 3-year term on the Zoning Board of Appeals, so you'll have to deal with us for another 3 years unless we get kicked out of office or something like that. So, any other communications? Miscellaneous business. Mr. Bartnick, you wanted to maybe have a discussion on the whole minutes issue and...
Correct. I mean, I think I pretty much stated everything earlier. I don't know I don't know what the next step would do. I don't know if perhaps Ms. Lancaster has answers for us right now that might alleviate everybody else, but those are some of the issues that I see. My main concern is what is it that the city attorney's office, the legal department, wants to have on paper before having to either defend against a citizen saying there's too much information in the video, not enough in the minutes, or a judge saying I can't review this, there's not enough evidence in the record.
Mr. Courtney, you wanted
Yes,
to...
I'd personally like to discuss the same subject, but I think we should wait and allow some time for legal department and staff to review the question and come back with a more detailed explanation of what and why. In other words, I'd rather not get into it tonight, but I agree that there should be a little bit more in there.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
You rarely get a short meeting, so maybe you want to take advantage of it tonight. But there are some things. I do know that there's been a new procedure due to the economy. If you look at all of the meetings that we have, council, this board, planning, they're all using just resolutions without those long details. And all of them are putting the minutes, the video minutes on the agenda so that people can look at it. What I will do for you is check the state law, talk to the city clerk, who's very well aware in open meetings what type of minutes we need, and I'll have a little report for you for next meeting, if that's acceptable to you, and try to get some of your questions answered.
Okay. Mr. Neal?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have one comment to make, and it kind of came up just with Mr. Bartlett's comments when he was correcting our minutes. And I guess I mentioned this just as a suggestion. We can talk about it, or you can discuss it with the legal department. Is when you corrected the minutes, Mr. Bartnick, you wrote down the time that something occurred, and I know that the video is, or the electronic media is wonderful for recording such, but finding things is somewhat problematic. Whereas if you had paper, it's easy to page through. Considering that our agendas are laid out, we have items 1, 2, 4, 6, whatever they might be, is it possible to create something that goes with the record when they're filed as an electronic media that just says, at minute 24, item 6, discussion began, item B started at 38 minutes? I mean, it makes it very quick to
Check with the video. The short answer is that I'm sure there is some equipment. I'm sure there is something that can do that. Right now, we are so short-staffed that I'm not sure this is a good time to look into that. But I will check for you. I'll check with the people that run our media center to see if it's something that they could do easily. I do have to say, your comments, I am more concerned about transcribing the corrections when not picking up no votes, that concerns me more than anything. So I will do some research on that as to why those aren't getting picked up properly, because that just is somebody that maybe should be double checking their minutes. And so we'll look into that to make sure that that's corrected, so hopefully you don't have to do that so much in the future. But all of these are great ideas, and we've come to an age where actually video meeting minute, short of a transcript, which we would never do because it's so cost prohibitive for the number of challenges we get. But, and we might do that if we got sued, and we have done that in the past. But right now, I think all these are good suggestions, and I will be happy to research all of them and get back with you, and I'll make sure our media people get that question and see if they can give you some kind of idea of how much time they would take to do that, and if they've got the equipment to do it.
Yeah, just a follow-up to that. I wasn't even thinking of equipment, and I don't know what length of time is required to merely scan it and say, this happened about this time, et cetera. But
having looked at numerous in-car videos doing dockets, it is very time-consuming to look at videos and try and get to the exact same spot and note it. And I'm sure Mr. Bartnick found that same experience watching a video. It's very time-consuming to get exactly where you want. You have to back up. But there might be some equipment that they have on hand that it's easier for them to do.
okay, thank you.
Any more comments or questions on this issue? Mr. Courtney?
Yeah, before you get into too much work of expanding, of finding things, I get a copy of minutes. I find them very easy to use. You could reproduce them for everybody else. It probably wouldn't take it any more time to come off with 7 copies as it does one, to be truthful. You might think of that as...
Right.
The other thought is that you do away with my copy entirely at the same time.
Any further discussion on the whole area of the minutes? Okay, I guess we'll wait until you can report back to us at the next meeting if that's
Get you something by next meeting.
Okay, great. Any further business from the board? No one is here from the public, so I guess we can dispense with public comment, and if we are done, we are adjourned for tonight's meeting.